you so much, Kim, Corinne, and Destin, for being here. Take it away, Kim.
All righty. Hello, everybody. It is great to be here. Let me just get oriented. There we are. Got a little kind of thing going on with my screens here, but it's all good. I am Kim Snyder, 3DPO. That's a long story right there. I do a lot of stuff with data and things like that, and nonprofits at Roundtable. And I turn it to Destiny.
Hello all, Destiny here. So I do a lot with cybersecurity and technology strategy and a lot of AI, fruits, vegetables, and little critters. Corinne.
Little critters. My name's Corinne. I am the marketing coordinator at Roundtable, and basically I do all your social media, PR, any type of, I do potato work for Destiny. Anything forward facing, I take care of it.
There you go. And yes, if you should happen to want potatoes and AI, that's something you could always ask us for, the visual images. But more about that later and things you can ask us for. All right, so today's agenda. Today we're providing a general overview to generative AI. Okay, and generative AI is the AI that's gotten a lot of press over these last couple years, and that's Copilot, and ChatGPT, and all these AI tools that we are using to create things, to generate things. We're also going to be talking about responsible AI and things that you can do when you're using AI to avoid some of the risks that can come with AI. I'm going to show you Copilot. This is generously funded by Microsoft, and we are going to be focusing on Copilot today, so you're aware. And so we're going to be showing you features of that. These same things that we're talking about do apply to some of the other AI systems. So you're going to be learning things that apply broadly, as well as some general use cases for getting started. We do leave a chunk of time at the end for Q&A. All right. The jargon buster. Okay, given that this is technology and this is AI, right? And there's some acronyms that you might hear us saying or we may lapse into, right? We try to speak kind of clearly, but every once in a while, it's an occupational hazard. Just let us know, put #jargon in the chat, and one of my lovely colleagues will say, Kim, explain that, please. Or Destiny, please explain that. Or Corinne, please. So just jargon bust us if we happen to lapse into that mode. All right, so the first thing is a question for you. What is your current relationship with AI? And I believe this is a poll that Kevin will put up, but just curious about, sounds like from reading the chat that came in earlier, there's some people that are using generative AI in a pretty kinds of advanced ways. So and that's really cool. I realize some people may be getting maybe pretty new to it. Now, is the poll showing? Oh, there it is. Oh, no, that's the second poll that comes up later. Bop, bop. I think this is actually Kevin, this is the poll that comes up later around the policy.
Yeah, I'm working on grabbing that poll right now. The display on the side for the polls is minimized, and I can't actually see them well. So give me a minute for 30 seconds.
So yeah, just hold on to, basically just curious as we're kind of setting forth here to understand different people's level of comfort with AI and how much, yeah, there it is. Thank you so much, Kevin. What is your current relationship with AI? You just starting? Are you kind of like, I haven't really gone down this road. I'm kind of clueless about it. You starting to dip your toe in the water a little? Have you kind of been using them occasionally? Or using them every day, right? And an advocate, I would say, are the folks who are helping other people at their organization to use AI, right? So evangelizing AI, if you will. So anyway, so thank you for putting responses in the chat. I think the other poll did go in here. There it is. So beginner, we got some people experimenting and some people incorporating it regularly, and a couple of advocates. And so we've got some people with some pretty advanced skills. Thank you so much for letting us know. It's always helpful just to get some context for it. I will kind of start out by saying that this particular session today is really geared for people who are newer to it, although we do provide some context for AI and kind of where we're at right now with AI, and that I think may be helpful. And even if you've been using AI, you may not be aware of. So, so this class is designed for people who are newer to it. So, all right. So it looks like we have a good mix. And if you're new to it, have no fear. You will. This is designed really for you to introduce you to this. All right. So one of the questions is, and nonprofits feeling the pinch lately, right? Another technology, like why learn another technology, right? And I get it. And sometimes I do this myself. I'm too busy to learn something new. And someone like Destiny may come up to me and say, "Oh, but Kim, you do this so much easier if you just used X, Y, and Z." And I was like, yeah. Tell me tomorrow because I don't have time today, right? I do this all the time. All right. So that's often how we feel when we've got a lot on our plate, which nonprofit people certainly do, right? So why bother, right? And so what happens is, so tomorrow finally comes. Actually, it's many tomorrows later. My friend's Destiny says, "Okay, you really want to see this now?" And so I go, "Okay, all right." And then she tells me, I'm like, "Oh man, why didn't I do this like 4 months ago when you first started telling me to?" And, that's okay too, but that is often this is what we call the square wheel paradox. Often we don't have time, or we're too busy, or we feel our plates are too full to kind of learn those things that can actually help us take more stuff off our plates. All right. I would say the same is true for AI, but in different and even more kinds of exponential ways. Okay, so you can get the like, "Oh, here's some new AI tools. Why don't you spend the afternoon learning about AI?" Whenever I have like actual work to do today, I don't have time playing with tech, right? And there's another side to this, which I'm aware of, that is part of the whole AI thing. Is like, "Oh, but if I learn this tool, does that mean someone's going to come and take my job? Does that mean I'm not necessary?" You're going to hear during the course of today why that is absolutely not true. Okay. But this is a feeling that in addition to the, I don't have time, this is there. Then later, once I finally listened to Destiny and let her teach me about AI, I'm like, "Oh man, this is so much better. In fact, I don't even have to schlep these rocks anymore." Okay, the AI schleps the rocks, and since I can have AI do some of this more kind of tedious work for me, I have more time to, in this case, build the house, but focus on the things that I kind of need more human attention. And as I like to tell people about AI, it takes some of the grunt out of the grunt work. Okay, and that's good, because like honestly, who has like too much time, right? But why is this all of a sudden in our lives? Like a couple of years ago, yeah, we'd hear some stuff, but it was like not that big a deal. Now it's like AI, right? So let's look at why it's moved so fast and had such kind of captivating powers. Okay, I kind of pressed animate a little too soon, but okay, so let's start like this analogy. Okay, so let's say we live by a lake and we have a little lake house. It's a beautiful summer day. I look out on my lake, there's no lily pads on day 0. Day 1, I look out, there's 1. Day 2, there's 2. Day 3, there's 4. day 4, there's 8. So you can see what they're doing each day is doubling, okay? And so with this going at this rate, by day 30, this lake is completely covered in lily pads to the extent that I cannot barely see the water, okay? So here's a question, and the math people, even not math people, get this one right. But though it's easy to miss sometimes, on what day is this lake half full? You can drop something in the chat. 29. Okay, so Tony has, all right, the logic people. Tony is correct. Thank you. Day 29, because if they're doubling, that would mean that half full, right? The next day be full. All right, a little bit more complicated. What about greater than 1% full? Venture a guess here? Destiny? I know this is a little bit harder. 20. Okay, Tony. Okay, Tony's definitely in the ballpark. Okay, so day 24. All right. So that is to say, if I were by the lake, right, and living in my little house, and you asked me on day 24, hey, Kim, you got a lily pad problem out there on your lake? And I'm going to say, no, it's fine. In fact, I swim in it every morning. I don't see any problem here. And it's day 24, and I think it's fine. In a mere 6 days, I would not get in that water for anything. Okay. So, how does this relate to AI? In terms of AI development, what day is it today? And we can a little bit shy today in the chat. That's okay. Day 1, 24. Okay. Interesting range. 2. See, so it's okay. Interesting range. 24, 25. Okay. There isn't a scientific answer to this one. The other ones, like the math folks, could have really done their stuff. But here, I would venture, you can ask AI to help, actually. So, it's 24, 25-ish, right? And it's that point at which it starts becoming very exponential, right? Because in the first part of the exponential curve, right? Like, you know how day 29, it was half full, and then the next day it was full. So that's the thing with exponential growth, is that it kind of looks like linear growth, which is this, for a while. But then, boom, it goes right on up. So let's look at this in other ways, right? So we're on that. Oops, come on. There you go. Okay, so what happened here? All right, so this is right over here, what we call the human performance benchmark. We're not talking about, just want to clarify for the record here, this is not human performance as in human with feelings and, emotions and things like that. This is like, think more SAT test level type of human performance, right? Benchmarks and skills, pure skills. Okay. So this is the line right here. So back in the late, 1989-ish, the post office was the first to really get going here with handwriting recognition, right? So that's this red line that we're seeing over here. The post office started using handwriting recognition to process zip codes, which makes a lot of sense. So reading zip codes from people's handwriting, God knows, I don't know if they were ever able to read mine, but they then sorted it into the right place in the post office, right? Speech recognition happened surprisingly right around the same time. I remember, actually, interestingly, I was working right about this time. I took a little diversion from nonprofits, and I was working in publishing, which some could argue is also a nonprofit, but that's a whole other conversation. But and at the time we were working on digital learning systems, and it seemed like the holy grail that was impossible to achieve. Speech recognition, like where a student could do an essay question and the computer would recognize it, impossible, right? And all right, but that was around 2010, 2011. All right, so it really picked up force here with image recognition. And that happened around at that was a lot of that work was done at Google, led by an amazing woman, Fei Li, who's has a book out there that shares really her story of the journey of AI. And her own life. But image recognition is where things really started to change, right? And when they started to be able to teach, computer systems were able to recognize images. Now they were labeled, and there was a whole process that they went through. But then that led to some of what looks like exponential growth, right? It looks like those curves. So reading comprehension 2016, whoop, that goes straight up, right? Speech recognition, the holy grail. I left publishing just before this was going to take off because it was not going to happen when I was there. Language understanding, etc. So these lines are going up, 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 up because of advances in all these technologies. So these capabilities of computer systems, like what the computer scientists and people working on these systems were all building off of each other's knowledge. And so this helped contribute to this amazing level of growth. And also, not to, an important factor in this is as the years go by, right, greater availability of data and much faster processing power for computer systems. So all of these things combined were kind of the perfect recipe for this kind of growth, which is why we're seeing this, like what we are today with, when Excel came on board, it didn't like change things like this. Even like cell phones took longer, right? So and I just found this one. This is a new chart, right? So this is taking this the next few years and looking at some of these things that it's starting to be able to do, like reasoning capabilities, mathematics. Like a couple years ago, you asked a math question in one of these, GPT systems, and it was like it couldn't get basic math right. But all of a sudden, bang, right? That's really increasing, right? So you start to see reasoning capabilities as these systems continue to grow, like PhD level science questions. And yes, if you're in the PhD program for science, yes, you should stay in it. It's, but so reasoning capabilities, mathematics, the ability to process math, and multimodal means the ability to take in lots of different sources like images, video, audio, and process this, and also output different sources. So that's multimodal capabilities. All right, so here's a different way of looking at it. And you might wonder about all these frogs. You're about to see a lot of frogs, warning. So that's on from the lily pads analogy. So we like a good mascot. It's the frogs for AI. All right, so what's happening here? So in March of 2022, you put frog into one of these text to image systems and you got this little guy. All right, not very froggy. April, there's some frog characteristics. So a month later, July, a couple months later, it is kind of a frog. By November, something happened here where, this thing looks like a frog. Do I? Yes, Destiny, I have a frog problem in my lake. Uh-oh, we won't even go down that road. So in May, 2023, so you can see it keeps on getting better, right? Arguably, the March 2024 frog looks more like a frog than the poor actual frog, right? And in February 2025, well, lo and behold, early this year, the thing was able to jump. All right, so this is just another way of looking at like that lily pad, like the pond filling up, right? It's really mind-blowing what it can do today. It's like, oof. So let's talk about what is generative AI, a little bit under the hood here for folks, and especially if you're new to this. All right, so some fundamental components. Okay, you have on the one hand, person, that's any one of us, that's writing a prompt that goes into the system, right? On the other side of the system, we've got a whole bunch of data. And in the middle, we have kind of the natural language processing, the machine learning systems that are doing the work here, pulling and extracting from the data and also taking in from what we put into it. So I will write a prompt. Please help me write a poem about frogs in springtime, right? And I will put that into the AI system. This natural language processing is then able to interpret what I've asked for, pulling from this enormous data source, and then that then is the answer that it gives back, and it gives me a poem about a frog. Now, if I say, no, actually, I wanted something more like a Shakespearean sonnet, that keeps going back and forth. Or, yes, that's what I wanted. No, that's not what I wanted. Any of my responses is considered reinforcement learning for these systems. In other words, by responding and by prompting, I am putting more data into this huge source of data, right? Right? Even my responses back are more, is more data that feeds the system, right? It is constantly learning and evolving, right? You ask the same exact prompt, twice in a row, and you will not get the same exact answer. And the reason why for that is will become clear in the next slide, I think. So anyway, know that these are the fundamental components. There's something to be said, and we will get into it more later. I think Destiny will be talking about the whole issue of privacy and the stuff we put into this system going into the data. And that can be a big deal. And that's one of the reasons why it's a great idea for organizations who have Microsoft to start with Copilot, because that actually provides a safety for that. But we will get more into that later. So, all right. So I hope I shared my audio. Do I have to do that in this? All right. So back in a couple years ago, I was at a conference on digital trust, and they were like, AI was splashing onto the scene for the first time, and everyone was like, everything was AI. And so Tanmay Bakshi, who was like, I believe 19 years old at the time, and like a complete prodigy, and like wrote his first program when he was 5. Anyway, he was giving the keynote at this thing, and there's like a lot of people in there. Anyway, he gave what I think is one of the best explanations of what's going on inside the LLM. Let me see if it'll, I have to unpen this. Right. Erasal ink, no more pen, make it go away. No?
Are you stuck in pen mode?
I'm stuck in pen mode. It's not glorious. Okay. No more pen. Erasal ink. Okay. Now I should be out of it. Okay. Excellent. And if anyone has trouble hearing, like raise your hand, or Destiny. Okay.
Say if you ask ChatGPT, what's AI going to do in the future, right? The way that ChatGPT generates a response for you is actually really interesting. It's effectively just entirely statistical language modeling. Given a sentence or given some sort of prefix, GPT's entire goal, its entire objective, is simply to take those words and predict, of all the tokens in its known vocabulary, the probability of any one of those tokens being the actual genuine next token in the sequence. That's all that GPT is doing. What you're seeing right now is a genuine visualization of the way that GPT, specifically GPT-2, would generate a response. It is simply taking words and predicting the probabilities of which word will come next.
Okay, so probabilistic statistics, that's what's going on. And that's pretty mind-blowing. At least it was to me. I was like, oh my God, because it's happening awfully quickly. And that was early days when he was doing this. But I will say Tanmay Bakshi was thrilled to give me this video because he knew we would be talking to nonprofits, and he was very happy to have more nonprofits involved in learning about AI and being able to use for it, and also being able to advocate for sane policies and things like that. So the LLM systems, go back to that pen that was kind of obnoxious earlier. So today's focus is going to be on the Copilot. Oops, I left out the other one here. The Copilot set of Microsoft generative AI tools. And there are other tools, and this is like, these are other comparable tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and a lot of these tools. So these tools all have a free version. Warning though, privacy, but we'll more about that later. But so they're free to try out all of these, okay? Free with a subscription, okay? And this is where Microsoft Copilot Chat is different, okay? So if you already have a subscription to the Microsoft products, you can use Copilot Chat as part of your subscription. And so when people come to the organization, they're logged into their computers, they can go ahead and use Copilot in a safer environment as part of that subscription, okay? Copilot also has a paid level, which has more capabilities and offers more tools and integration with other like Office types of tools like Excel, PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, your email, etc. So Copilot, the paid version, is the one that allows those kinds of integrations. But Copilot, Microsoft Copilot Chat, and a lot of what we're going to be doing in the next session, we do things in both Microsoft Copilot Chat, and then we'll show you some stuff with Copilot Pro, but a lot of you know, everyday tasks and types of things that people were putting into the chat earlier are things you can do in Microsoft Copilot Chat. The other systems also have paid versions, and so these are those. But so these are kind of the main systems. There are new things cropping up all the time, but these are kind of the major models. And today, as I said, we're going to be focusing on Microsoft Copilot. So generative AI. So if you're new to it, if you haven't used it, at all, and you're kind of thinking, and some people will be like, oh God, what if I ask it the wrong thing? Or what if, should I ask it this? And it's like, try, right? So it's great for brainstorming, overcoming any kind of like first page, blank page, first sentence of a hard email syndrome. Like it's great for stuff like that. You can ask the AI a question. The next session, in 2 weeks, we talk a lot more about prompting and different ways to do that. But you can experiment with, it's about how you ask the AI to create something for you. Just like if someone came into your office and you did not know them, and they didn't know about you, like how would you tell them what you need them to do to help you with, right? What kinds of information would you give them? And the general rule is the more clear instructions you give, the better it's going to give you what you want. But and also, so whatever details, themes, if you want certain style, if I wanted that poem about frogs in a certain, Shakespearean, whatever, I asked for that in the prompt. It's not just going to know that, right? I think we go to Destiny. So we're going to be talking a lot more about prompting and things like that. So Destiny, I turn it over to you about responsibility.
And we'll do the rest of this in iambic pentameter. No, we will not.
Okay.
But from what Kim was saying, why Tommy Bakshi wanted more nonprofits to be involved with AI from the get-go, and why they were excited about learning we were talking more about this with nonprofits is because of responsible AI. You know, Kim spoke a little bit at the beginning about concerns folks have over AI taking away people's jobs or things like that. And while this is a bit of a little bit of a trope at this point, the AI won't take your job, but people who use AI might. And I think that's because there's a lot of productivity that can be done with AI that gets some of the busy work out of the way. So things that might have taken you a very long time in the past, AI can do for you quickly. And the ability to be able to be more productive in the areas of your job that are important and the things that are not just the busy work or some of the more administrative tasks, therein lies a bit of the difference. But the other concern that comes up a lot is what people will see on the news and about cybersecurity and other things. And that is with all of the things that are out there nowadays that AI can do. There's always, unfortunately, the other side of the positivity coin, which is there's some not great things that you can also do with AI. And it's not necessarily that it's a function of AI itself, it's the people doing things, but there are some arenas where, and we see questions come in about privacy and confidentiality in data, where your responsible portion of AI comes in, and where using or developing AI on the developmental side of things becomes important. So on the next slide, where this can meet both how it's being used and how it's being developed is by having the responsible human being sitting in the middle there. That's by having people who know how to influence, people who know how to build community, people who know how to start legislation to create an impact are important. And that is by and large the nonprofit community, people who have a voice, people who understand how research and influence and things like that work. And as you think through the ethical use of AI for your organization, you also can think about how you can influence the organizations developing it, the companies developing it, and things like that, and then use your voices to build impact there as well. So we really want, even though we call it, artificial intelligence, the human piece of AI is hugely important. And we're going to talk a little bit more in the interaction between the human involvement and how important it is, because AI, you don't necessarily want it to sit out there on its own. It is a collaborative process. But when we think through all of these concerns, we want to talk something about what we call the sphere of influence. So there's concerns people have. So when we think about what we're concerned about with AI, how quickly it's developing, what it can do with our data, how it can be biased, how it can be influenced by, unfortunately, some negativity in the world. Can it take our job? What about all the bad actors? We hear more about AI phishing and deep fakes and things like that, and other things that might be a risk to your organization. So these are the things that we're concerned about, but we don't necessarily have specific control over. But what we could have there is influence. And this is why I say, having the nonprofit voice here becomes important, because now you can advocate for ethical use. You can work with organizations on development, and we'll have an example a little bit from now of someone whose research impacted things greatly about bias in AI. And this also, again, speaks to legislation. There might be some things out there right now that may or may not be passed that are trying to prevent AI legislation. So this is where we also, look at how we work within our communities to influence positive change and positive regulation. And then also, by using it and thinking it through in our organization and how you choose to use it. And that is where you do have control. So this is where you can educate yourself and educate your staff, co-workers, friends, family, and frogs. This is where you can upskill within the organization. This is also where you as an organization can make informed decisions and determining where you feel AI is appropriate to be used within your organization. And in some areas where it may not be, in areas or for folks who have more confidential or regulatory data they handle, you make a decision that that is not something that we want to put through AI yet until we've grown confidence in how to use it. So there's a lot of things that you do have control over in how this is utilized. And then the other thing that we do have control over is our understanding. So on the next slide, we've got when we have some of the other concerns, and our understanding of the way AI works is that information may not be true. It's not really hallucinations right now. It's called confabulations, if I could say either word. And it still happens. It has certainly gotten better. And when you are giving the AI source data, where you are giving it specific files to be analyzed, you're going to have some different results than when you're telling it to just come up with something that's research-based, unless you are using the deep research modes that allow you to cite sources so you know where that information is coming from. But you do need to bring this awareness to the use of AI that not everything is going to be true. Another thing on the next slide that you want to bring into this is how you can apply the human element, that level of expertise, that constant cycle of people AI, into the mix. So when you are working with a topic that you are not an expert in, and you are not doing this from a specific source or with research modes enabled so you can see where the source of the information comes from, don't believe it unless you can verify it. So if you're saying write a research paper about the evolution of frogs and it comes up with something and you are not an amphibiologist, because I like making up words, a reptilian, no. So then you wouldn't necessarily say, yes, I'm going to take this as at its word. This is not necessarily so much of a risk when you're doing creative writing and help me draft a better email or start me out with the ideas for a press release, because that is all, more subjective. But in these areas where you are relying on it to be factually correct, review, and don't depend on it to give expertise on a topic that you are not one of or don't have access to, so you are not able to validate it. And so this is where, we kind of go back into the loop. And I think this is where Kim likes to draw on the screen, but it's really, remember, this is a tool. It is not the end all and be all. I don't hand a question or a prompt to my AI, let it generate something and then walk away. So I made a cute little poison dart frog, but then did I go and look at real pictures of the frog and see, is this what it actually looks like, before I went out there and said, hey, real looking frog? I did. And so that's the part where you want to keep yourself in the loop. And, you can say, this looks good, but it's not right. I review, I iterate, I go back to the AI and say, fix this, fix that, use this source data, check on this, and around it goes until you can get a bit more comfortable in how you ask the question, but also the review of the information that you're outputting in. And the nice thing about AI, unlike your coworker who might be the expert, you can keep asking it the same thing in another way again and again and again, and it's not going to want to find a poison dart frog and take care of the problem, right? So you can keep asking without AI getting annoyed, which for some of us is a good thing, right? But the other thing, when we talk about the veracity of information, we also have to talk about how some of this information was collected in the first place. And that's where I want to talk a little bit about bias in AI. And because, unfortunately, the world has a bias, and then therefore means that the world's data is also biased, that is something that we want to take into account. And when we are looking at things that might be more fact-based, how much bias is in there, but also just from like the generalization of the information that's coming back out, are we reviewing this with an unbiased eye? And so I wanted to show a little interesting clip that talks about, and this is a little less funny when it comes from me, but the pale, we'll call the pale female data problem, but it is really the pale male data problem.
Researchers like Joy Blomweeny have repeatedly found that certain groups tend to get excluded from the data that AI is trained on, putting them at a serious disadvantage.
with self-driving cars, when they tested pedestrian tracking, it was less accurate on darker-skinned individuals than lighter-skinned individuals.
Joya believes this bias is because of the lack of diversity in the data used in teaching AI to make distinctions.
As I started looking at the data sets, I learned that for some of the largest data sets that have been very consequential for the field, they were majority men and majority lighter-skinned individuals or white individuals. So I call this pale male data.
Okay, pale male data is an objectively hilarious term, and it also sounds like what an AI program would say if you asked it to describe this show. But biased inputs leading to biased outputs is a big issue across the board here.
Okay. And so when I was mentioning how it's okay, how people can influence the way AI is developed. So Dr. Joy took this information, took this research and brought it to Microsoft and other organizations to point out, hey, we are seeing some obvious bias in the data that's being used here, and that influenced and impacted change. So there is change can be had. This is not necessarily there's nothing we can do about it kind of problem, but we do need to be aware that there is a potential problem so we can then influence from there. And so on our next slide, I think this is going to answer a bit of the questions that have come up. If you have a Microsoft organizational 365 subscription, and it could be a donation. So this isn't necessarily when we say the donation product is included. So when we say free, we don't mean that it's just because you're not necessarily paying for it. It is still an organizational or what we call a business subscription account. So if your organization uses Microsoft 365, your email, your files, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., then you have a overlying blanket of privacy that comes with your terms of service for your Microsoft subscription. And that includes Microsoft Copilot Chat. So you do have Microsoft Copilot Chat as part of your subscription, and that is covered by the same privacy and other things that the rest of your Microsoft subscription is covered by. So that's one thing to note. If you are using a free, like you just go to Microsoft Copilot and you're not logged in as anything, you're not using your organizational account, you are not logged in, then that is not covered by any kind of privacy. But if you are logged in to your destiny@nonprofit.org and you have that 365 subscription, then yes, you do have safety covered by and privacy covered by that overreaching subscription model. So what I was saying is that in the free tools, like if I just go to Copilot, no login, or same thing if I just went to ChatGPT with no account or any of those, you are not covered by that same privacy. That is where your information and your data could be used for training. So for the organizations and the folks who have asked in the chat, like, well, we handle some, some confidential data. We have some concerns about privacy. Will our data be used for training? And so when we say safety, I see that in the chat. What we mean by that is your data will not be used outside of your organization for training purposes. This will not be exposed to other people for when they use AI or anything like that. But if you are using free tools, that privacy does not exist. So that's the primary difference between using free tools and subscription-based or paid tools. So kind of going back to our frog. So again, remember, AI it's a tool. It's not a person. So you decide what it can do. You decide what it works on, but you also need to tell it what you want it to do. It is not 100% intuitive. I would say in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily intuitive. So it's the assistant that you want to be very clear and, you know, give it a lot of context, but you can also be repetitive and try saying things in different ways. So that's okay. It's not going to be like your coworker who will get annoyed by it. And you also validate, unless it's, you know, creative type writing, but anything that is, you know, potentially factual based. I did see someone ask in the chat about sources. So when you ask for sources or you're doing something in a research mode where it gives you links, you can click on that URL and then go to the site itself to validate. So it's not going to, you know, I've never seen, at least in that occasion, it giving a URL that it just made up and that when you clicked on it did not exist. It would now, whether or not the source it found is something that is 100% reliable, that's where you do the human vetting, or you ask it like only cite from medical journals or only cite from, you know, government sources or something like that. That is a source material that you might trust. So no, not everything on the internet is true. But then again, this is why we validate. So you can click that link, look at the source and say, yes, I determined that this is a reputable source. Therefore, I will take the information that I've been given where it has been cited specifically for me as something I feel more comfortable with and do not think that it's a confabulation. So with all of that being said, I think it is time for another poll. And I think this is a two-parter. So part one is, are you or anyone else at your organization using AI for work-related tasks? And I hope I'm correct about this being a poll, or is it an answer in the chat?
I'm reopening that and I'm going to launch it again. There we go.
There we go. I see it now. And the one thing I will say to some of the folks who think maybe people in your organization are not using it, they probably are, and you know, just may not have said anything about it, or sometimes people don't even really realize that they're using it. They just get a little prompt that pops up and says, hey, can I help you with something? And then they ask it a question or put information in there. So sometimes, yeah, you know, there may be use that you were not aware of. And I believe the second part of our question is, if I can find it, I have lost I've lost my questions. The second part of the question is,
I can give you that question.
Oh, can you? Because I've lost my questions.
Sure. Okay. So we can see, first of all, are you or anyone at your place of work using AI for any work-related task? It is overwhelmingly a yes. In fact, it's 85%. In fact, hold on to that number, actually.
I remember the second question, and that is just
hold on to that number, though, folks.
Has your organization done any kind of training surrounding AI or have an AI policy? That's kind of the follow-up. And unfortunately, I would say statistically, we are now veering in the opposite direction of usage. Okay, yeah, so from the results, it's still evening out, but it looks more of like a 70s, in the mid 70s is a no, we haven't, which is a bit of the opposite of use. Yeah, I mean, it's a little less than, right?
Yeah, not quite 50-50.
Yeah, and so we've got a bit on the people are working on policies, but maybe not training.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's interesting, these numbers. Just hold on to what you're seeing here in our actual studio audience.
Live studio audience says a lot more usage and a lot less policy. And so that's why on the next slide.
Okay, so I think we can close that and go on to the next.
And that is why we strongly urge you to, in your organization, develop an AI strategy and policy. That is because, you know, interestingly enough, we were about
85.
Yeah, I think so. Our numbers 85, 75 response, but 85 to about almost this 84 are using it. So as you can see, statistically, you're in the norm, but what we really want to do on the next slide is improve that. So we would like to see the utilization of AI be more in alignment with having AI strategy and policy. And so we've included a link, if someone can drop that into the chat. If you do not have an AI policy yet and you want a kicking off place, TechSoup and Microsoft have developed an AI usage policy for use for you and with Copilot. And so you really do want to start developing one now. And people will inevitably ask in the chat, is it okay to use AI to help me write an AI policy? And yes, it absolutely is, as long as you are then subsequently reviewing it and making sure that what it has is in alignment with how your organization wants to work and with the tools that you have approved for use within your organization. And I just don't want to steal any of Kim's thunder here. I don't think I am. But think about it, where if you don't really know a lot about AI yet, and you don't know what tools are going to be safe or secure with your environment, but you are 365 users, then you can say, right now, our organization only wants us to use Copilot, and we only want to use it in these particular use cases for the moment until we can learn more. You're going to get the recording and the slides from this training, so you can share your knowledge and your learning. But I think it is really important to think through organizationally to have both a strategy, an education path, and a policy, because folks are going to use these tools. Folks are going to experiment with these tools, but unless they know some of the risks about putting potentially sensitive data into free tools versus paid protected tools, you do run some risk for your organization. And so you want to be able to provide that to folks. So everybody wants to know how to drive the car safely. So really, you're kind of giving that driver's ed manual for AI. And with that, I believe I hand it back over to Kim, Kim, I feel like maybe it's just me, but your video does look a little frozen on my end. I don't know if you want to start and unstart. Well, I can hear you fine, but your video has not moved in a very long time. So either you're very still or you might be a little stuck on your video. And I'm getting news from the chat that other folks see you as frozen as well.
Yeah, I was impressed. I thought she was playing freeze tag over there. I was like,
I don't know, Kim, if you wanted to start pause and then restart your camera, that might clear it up. I could hear you before, but now when you just asked if you could be heard, we can't hear you anymore unless you want to say something. If you can still hear us, Kim, and advance the slide to the next one, because then I can just carry on until you fix the technical difficulties, but I'm not sure if we've lost you altogether. If we have lost you, then I can, if you give me a minute. Oh, did we totally lose Kim? Come back, Kimmy. So
I have this up if you'd.
Yep, no, I can, let me just get to where we were in the deck, and then I can take over until Kim is able to rejoin us. Just give me 1 second to get there.
Wait, y'all hear her? That's crazy. They're saying they can hear her. I can't even see her.
She has totally disappeared from me. That's interesting. Kim, come back. Well, people can see and hear her, so now I'm really confused. Well,
I keep getting muted and unmuted. It's so strange.
Now we're seeing that she has disappeared. So, what I'm going to do then?
Am I not back now?
You are back. Yes.
I don't know what happened there. Wow, like it took one person, Destiny, I believe it was you, saying, "I think your screen is frozen." It happened fine.
Okay. All right, Kim is
okay,
back.
I'm gonna take it away. I'm back.
Sorry about that.
Yikes, that was really rude of me. I'm sorry.
I was about to channel my inner Kim and take over, but by the time I figured out how to share my screen, you were back.
I'm back. I survived. Okay.
So I think we were on slide. Yeah. So we were.
Yes, this
I was
one.
handing over for the must-have policy, and then you were going to take over to talk a little bit more about how you can get started with Copilot.
Okie doke. Sorry about that. But here's the thing. One of the things I wanted to add on to what Destiny was saying about this policy, and people asking, can AI help? Sure, AI, yeah, it can help write the policy, but the important thing is the conversation in your organization. And what creating a policy does is it forces your organization to have that conversation and decide as an organization, how are we going to use this tool? And the ebook is great in terms of giving you those different things to think about when you're having that conversation, but involve people in your organization. So let's talk about getting started. And I think, Corinne, I'll give you a pass right now. We'll share. I'll do this part just because we lost some time, unless I'm stealing your thunder. Oh, you can talk about this, the free one, and you did talk about a little.
Yeah, I keep getting muted. So if I randomly get muted just now, I'm like, I don't know why that keeps happening. But yes, so with the free Copilot, we like to call it the vanilla, you get a few of your basic features. I'd say it's good for someone that's just testing out AI and you want to see if you actually want to invest in it. You can't save any of your information, but you still can do things like write social media outlines, marketing campaigns. It can give you brainstorming ideas. It also has prompts as well. So it's a pretty cool tool just to see if you'd like to test it out and then go from there.
Thank you. And we'll be demoing that next week.
We will.
Yes. So stay tuned. All right. Then if you have a Microsoft account, okay. Yes, an important point from Destiny there. Free, none of the free. Remember, not, like, you don't want to put any sensitive information, personal information in a free tool. So you can have an account that's your work account or your personal account, right? You have a personal subscription and work subscription. I actually have both, to be honest, and I can get to Copilot from both. But my work account is what I use if I want to be sure, and we're going to talk about what this little thing is right here in a minute, but if I want to be sure that I have security. Now, this is, again, not paid additional. So in no case here am I paying additionally. This comes with my Microsoft subscription. Okay, so how do we know it's private? Okay, now don't mind some of these screenshots because I actually do happen to have the paid version because we're teaching this class and we need to use these tools, etc. But that your information that you're putting in and the stuff you're getting out is in your enterprise, meaning in your organization's Microsoft environment when you see that little green shield, okay? And in order to see it, you need to be logged into your work account and you need to be, look for that shield, all right? We're going to show you more of this. Access does need to be enabled at your organization. Okay, so if you get people, if you have your IT person turn it on, then you would have access to it. So again, Microsoft Copilot it's what they call web grounded. Okay, so it's pulling information from the web. It's not pulling information from your data, right? Your work files and things like that. Microsoft 365 Copilot is the one that's more integrated into the Office tools and hence can then, has access to the data in your system. And that's one of the reasons people want to use it, right? So they can use it, you can use it with your own work files, though we're going to be talking about that some more next week for sure, going into more information about some precautions that you want to take, if you're going to do that. So Microsoft Copilot features, okay, so the free one gives you the AI-powered kind of web assistance, right? It's through a web browser. Kurt, I do not believe it's turned on by default. I believe it's turned on, it needs to be turned on by the administrator at your organization. But I turn to the all-knowing Kevin for that. It's web grounded knowledge, right? So it's pulling information from the web, information that's out there. Okay. You can use some of what's called an agent, right? So a Microsoft agent is kind of, think of it as a pre-packaged prompt or like an AI macro that's like that's set up to do a certain task well. Okay. You can use some of the agents that come with Microsoft, right? With the free version. And you also have the data protection. Yes. So agent equals paint by numbers, or it's limited, but in the free version, it is the amount of access you get to agents is a bit limited, but it gives you a little taste of them. All right. So kind of like looking at web agents versus chat, and you also hear something called agentive AI. Don't conflate those two. All right. So we're thinking task-focused Copilot agents and standard Copilot chat. So the types of use cases for each of these, right? Copilot chat, you're asking it questions back and forth. The agent, you've set up your prompt already, and it can be a multi-step task or a very complex prompt. It's like if you have to write a certain type of like article all the time, or you need to do certain job postings that have certain types of information that you want to be sure gets included. That's the type of thing you'd use for an agent. Copilot chat is back and forth, right? Free-flowing conversation. It can be more complex. So, you can ask, so here are two examples, right? If I want to know what are some of the popular project management tools, write a LinkedIn, or write a LinkedIn post about it in your series. That's Copilot chat, right? Now, if you had a certain method, which we're going to show you next week, actually, the clear method for prompt writing to optimize a prompt for the Copilot environment. So that's an example where you'd use the Microsoft Copilot or prompt coach agent, right? Or use a grant application using a specific format, and you can kind of feed it that information and write, you use your prompt writing coach to write a super duper good prompt to that the end build in your agent. So we will show you those things next week. It probably makes more sense when you see it. There are my goodness, lots of you will get this. I'm not going to don't worry, people, I'm not going to read this slide. But suffice it to say, TechSoup and Microsoft have gotten together to provide some information that clearly kind of talks through what these different plans are and what you get from them. Okay. And if you have any questions, certainly drop those in the chat, and folks from that team will help answer them. This is another way of looking at the similar information, what gets included. So Copilot chat, that's the one that's free with your Microsoft subscription. So these are the things you get. You get some agents, and with the 365 Copilot, that's where you start to see it in more of these other tools like Excel, Word, Outlook that you're seeing here. Okay, so they have these resources. So let's talk about some nonprofit use cases for AI. And this is kind of a lead up to like an offer we're going to give you at the end of this class to come to the next one. So here's a good example. Again, fine-tuning or improving content. Destiny was saying this earlier. Like, it's less of a risk if you're like doing stuff like, please copy edit this for me. So it's not going to completely spit out gibberish. You would certainly know because you wrote the original and you can see if it's better, right? So improving or fine-tuning content. I often ask it to help me when I have to do something on social, something like that, or write a specific type of email, potentially sensitive situation. I use AI all the time for that kind of stuff, okay? I give it the scenario. One thing I love AI for is giving it big, long reports that then I don't have to read cover to cover. And then I get summaries of them. And you can even then kind of query those summaries. So I can ask specific questions. Say I didn't need to know about everything in this report. There was a specific thing I wanted to know more about, like ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being. Say this was the one thing I cared about. I could then, go ahead and ask more questions of, this publication through AI. I find that amazingly helpful and time saving, because really, who has time to read everything? All right. So you can also give it, here's another example. Give it some content. Say I need to do a workshop on this Global Goals Week lesson toolkit. I use the UN Sustainability Goals for all these examples, but so say I need to run a workshop on one of these things. Then I could put the report, the PDF into the AI, and then ask it to create the agenda for me, create some discussion questions, help me think through, how to like break out the agenda into different time segments. And it's really helpful. Is it the end all be all? And would I just go ahead and give this workshop without checking? Absolutely not. But it's a great starting point. And sometimes I get some really great ideas from it that I didn't think of often, actually. Right, here's another one. This I use a lot, okay? I don't know if Corinne, do you use this a lot? Audience personas, right? So I create personas, like, tell me some personas, some audience members, who might be interested in this workshop. I don't know, Corinne, do you do this?
Lately I've been testing out personas and also writing in different voices with Tater and Stash. I've been experimenting.
Okay. Yeah, it's a cool thing for any folks out there working in marketing and communications. You can have it, create some personas for you so that then the messaging, like the invitations that you create or the LinkedIn posts kind of are more appealing to these different types of personas. Super helpful. Yeah, and then so you can create your personas and then generate content that's specific for these different personas. Oops, where'd that happen? That slide popped in there again. Oh, sorry. I think they copied themselves in there. Anyway, this is the point we've been trying to get to. So next week, Corinne, I hand it over to you.
Yes. Okay. So this is the fun stuff. So session 2, do you have anything that you'd like to test out with AI for your nonprofit? Maybe you need a social media campaign. Do you have a lengthy report you want it to read? We could go through it and do any of your tasks. So next slide. June 25th, we will be having session 2. Let us do your work. Send us your social media campaign. Let us do a graphic for you. Maybe you need an outline for whatever you need for your nonprofit. Send it over to us and we will demo it live. So you'll get to see Copilot live in action, the free version, and then the other flavors as well.
So Ruth, we'll set up an agent, but you got to tell us more, right? We need to know what, and if you want us to set up an agent, like do a newsletter in the style of ours, right? You got to give us an example, because otherwise I'll use generics, but we can, and do people need the registration link? Let me find that.
But so for all of you throwing ideas of things you would want into the chat, click on the form, fill that out in the form. If it's something that you need to give us an example of, you make sure it's something that is anonymized so you can give us a link to it that doesn't contain any kind of sensitive data. But if you want something, put it in the form, but then you have to show up on the 25th in order for us to share it with you.
Yes, and it's fun when you show up because we get to show you kind of what we've done with what you've given us and how much Copilot really does change the game for nonprofits. So drop it in. Let us do your work.
I love seeing what the requests are that come in from people. I love it because it's like, it's great ideas that people come up with. Yeah, and it's like, is there any writing you don't want to do? Do you need to write like a standard operating procedure? How's that? Or if anyone here says, you know what, I want you guys to like help me write my AI policy, or at least the first draft for my organization, because you'd never like just not show it to people, then ask for that, but tell us what tools are you using. So you're using people using Copilot in your organization, so we can include that in we'd be happy to draft a policy for you if you need one. So yes, let us do some work for you next week. Like who makes that offer, right?
Right.
So anyway, we have some time left for questions. We do save time for Q&A. I know there were some great questions in here. I will stop the share and come back. So
I think some of the general questions, which are typically, will we get a copy of the recording and the slide deck? The answer is you will. I think, Kevin, there were some questions about, as usual, not surprisingly, about licensing. That comes up a lot. So, you know, the licensing, if you have a 365 subscription, then the Copilot chat comes with that. That is covered by your privacy agreements with Microsoft. If you do not have any kind of Microsoft 365 subscription, you can still use the free version that Corinne showed us of Copilot, but you do not want to put any kind of sensitive or, you know, identifying information in it, and you can't, you know, save it anywhere. You do have to copy and paste it into another type of document. You can add on to your 365 subscription with a separate Copilot license that will give you more advanced features and functionalities, like integration with Teams and Word and Excel and some Power BI and other things on the back end. There had been a question about, does the level of license you have subscription in nonprofit E1 or an E3 or an E5 versus a Microsoft Business Premium? So there's more of the back end stuff that varies on that, but the front end Copilot is still kind of the same. So that's a little bit more of the complex question. So you get more back end stuff with the higher level of subscription, but to get the full Copilot everything, that is an add-on subscription on top of whatever your regular Microsoft subscription is. And Kevin can answer questions and was gracious enough to put their email into the chat so you can get more information directly.
That was great, Destiny.
So hopefully that helps.
Really, like, wow.
It only took me, what, 6 sessions or however many.
Wow, she's like good.
I know. Okay, so we have someone asking about, can a chatbot be considered an AI?
Well, I'm just answering that.
Oh,
yes. I was typing in, but Emmanuel, yes, it is something that utilizes natural language processing, right? Because it's understanding language and giving back. However, that said, as much as I'd love to, it's a little beyond the scope of something we can create for the next demo. But yes, that is an example of a tool that uses natural language processing, and that some organizations have found can be real time savers. There are also certain risks involved, right? And that's part of the whole thing about assessing AI projects. It's one of the things that can come up in someone's in when you're thinking about your AI policy and how do we as an organization want to use this, right? Any other questions?
There's a lot of questions about discounts and TechSoup discounts on Copilot or Microsoft, and I would say direct those to Kevin. I think he would be the best person to answer that. And there was, I think, a couple of people who had asked about, is Copilot turned on by default? It depends on, I think it depends on how long you've been in there, but one way you can tell is that if you go to the link I just put in the chat, which is basically m365.cloud.microsoft, and you're logged in with your organizational account and you go to Copilot, if it works, it's turned on. If it doesn't, it's not. And you would want to, I think at that point, probably have the appropriate discussion with people inside of the organization as to why it was disabled, or if it was disabled versus just being off by default. But before, you put in that request from, particularly if like a secondary IT provider, you would want to have the appropriate discussion within your organization. Hey, I want to have Copilot turned on for us. And then we think about how are we going to use it? What's going to be our policy around it? You want to get your frogs in a row before you jump into the lily pad waters.
Yeah, and even if you happen to log in and you type in Copilot and it's like, wow, it's here, and you haven't heard anyone at your organization talking about it, and you never hear people using it, people might not even know, right? Not like if this is the first time you're hearing of it, so it might be so you might want to also, that's another good reason to have that conversation. Do you realize that we as an organization have Copilot, and a distinct advantage is that it's in the safety of your Microsoft enterprise? Okay, so because that's one of the kinds of blockers that a lot of people see in organizations. Oh, but it's not private. Well, it is as private as stuff on our SharePoint is. So, you know, um, so, okay, there's some more information about discounts. Do I have any, oh, Michelle, boy, we could have a conversation. It's a little out of the scope of this, of this particular session, but creating a chatbot is definitely something that's becoming more and more feasible. That said, it comes with risks, okay, especially anything that's public facing, because remember how Tanmay Bakshi was talking about how probabilistic statistics work, and generative AI, and the reason Destiny kept talking about how, well, it can make stuff up, or she used that fancy word confabulation, which would almost count as jargon, Destiny. So part of the reason that happens, and someone else asked if it makes up references sometimes, right? It's generative, it's making things. So it's blessing, but sometimes it's curse, right? So it creates, and it's probabilistic statistics. So it's usually mostly right. I do not ever ask it for a quote. And I made this mistake early on when I was first starting to use these tools. And those lawyers, okay, then they're still doing it. And sorry, any lawyers out there, don't do this, right? They will ask for legal cases for like precedent, for citing, and the thing didn't exist. The quote, I wanted a quote from Fei Li for one of the first AI sessions I was doing, and this beautiful quote came out that she never said. And then nothing that she ever said after could live up to this beautiful quote that I kept trying to find. Because it's kind of giving me what it thinks I want, well, how it's interpreted my instruction, right? So it's giving me this perfect, Fei Li quote about the genesis of AI and the importance of diversity, and so that's so when you think about how does this relate to the chatbot conversation, when people put out public facing chatbots, they can sometimes make stuff up. And so you need to know how to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think there's also something which we I don't know if we really touched on, but from the back end of what different products can provide is also if you build something on a certain platform, you want to make sure that you're periodically reviewing the service itself, that they haven't made any changes to their terms or their service agreements, or in the way that the tool operates entirely. As I think there was a big kind of controversy, as they say in Britain, about Zoom. I mean, a while ago, that when they turned on AI, they just kind of turned it on and started doing training, and obviously and fairly and rightfully, people were not pleased about that. And it was just like an immediate change in the terms. They have totally walk that back and fix the problem, and have done so for a while. But if you're putting something out there that is particularly collaborative with your audience or external folks, and that you're putting kind of your reputation behind, you absolutely want to make sure that you're keeping on top of how these tools and the service agreements behind them operate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kevin mentions the feeding the agent with healthy data, right? This is where data matters and data quality matters because if that's what and spending the time to test these things, to see what are the different possible responses that can come up. New York City, just so if anybody, any New Yorkers in the audience, um, uh, Eric Adams, the mayor, released, they spent a lot of money on this chatbot for I forget what it was called, the NYC chatbot, and it did not provide correct answers to some basic employment questions like the minimum wage and things like that. Now they did not, however, take it down because they also had a disclaimer. This does not always provide correct answers. And so their thing was they were testing this. Okay, but I hope no one made some minimum wage boo-boos out there from that. But again, so your data and what you give it really matters. Tammy, you asked, it's a little out of the scope of this about Perplexity. Perplexity is a tool I sometimes use. I use that mostly when I'm trying to search and find resources, right? But so
Yeah.
less for this kind of creative, generative types of tasks that we've been talking about today.
Yeah. And I think we were talking about this the other day, or maybe it was today earlier, and I don't remember, about how one of the things that's going to sting the different AI tools out there is that I think some of them are going to start specializing a little bit more. And it's like anything else where you want to, there's some good general tools like a spork. And then there are some very specialized tools like a grapefruit spoon. And so I think it's depending a little bit on what you're trying to accomplish. Are you in spork territory? Are you in grapefruit spoon territory? Or, as the tools develop, you might need to reevaluate, and what was once a spork has now converted into grape shears.
What?
These are all real things, by the way. I am not making any of that up.
I'm Team Spork. Yes.
Come on, don't you have grape shears? What's wrong with you?
I do have grapefruit spoons. Let's say, Kurt, thank you for that good question. With the protected Copilot with our tenant, can you pull information from our file sharing documents? Well, stay tuned for next week. We will talk about that more. But okay, so one of the things we do talk about is data governance. And, some organizations very much, there's certain benefits, the Copilot, the subscription one, the one that even if you have your Microsoft 365 subscription that you would pay extra for, the one that you can use with Excel and Word and PowerPoint and, Outlook and everything else, that can pull stuff from and the fact that it's supposed to, right? So it's supposed to help you work with your work documents. That said, that you want to make sure that people are putting stuff in the right place, because technically you could access anything that you have access to, right? In your Microsoft. And there may be some things that you have access to that you don't realize. Like if the HR wants to make sure it's putting things in the right place and finance and stuff like that, for example. So any other questions?
Yeah, so for 2 weeks, on the 25th, register, ask us to do your work for you, and we'll talk more about the capabilities of the different versions. We'll talk more about agents, we'll talk about prompts, we'll talk about all the fun things on how you do something with Copilot now that you know about what Copilot is.
Awesome. Any final words, Kim?
I think that's it. Just give us work to do, right? Who says that really in this day and age? And then come and see the work that we've done. Nothing so sad as doing a great demo and then they're not here. It's like,
right?
Yeah,
So
we're going to do the work. Show up.
be happy to do it. And if you have something where it's like you want it in a certain style, or you want, like, people have asked us for slide presentations, like we need a slide demo of this program from our, organization. Happy to try it. And we need one in a different language. Happy to do that too. But you need to then tell me what organization you're part of and what the program is.
Yeah. And so next session, when we show stuff, it will be things that people have asked for. We're not randomly finding an organization's data and making something. We are being asked to make things.
But we may ask Destiny if she'll be so kind as to show the thing that blew everyone's mind. So just stay tuned. We're not going to say no more. It involved Excel. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm still mind blown because I'm terrible at Excel. It made me look like an Excel genius.
Honestly.
Okay. Really. I mean,
Which
and people like.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you to the Roundtable team, Kim, Destiny, and Corinne. Thank you for Kevin and the Texas team in the background. Just a friendly reminder, you will get the recording and the slides within a few days. So look for that in your email box. And lots of thank yous in the chat. And we'll see you on June 25th. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Look forward to seeing you on the 25th.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.